Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this. This is Sam Prentice Makes It Happen. I am Sam Prentice making it happen, and we are down to the interview stages. Today we are talking about resin 3D printing. My guest today is Californian citrus farmer with an extraordinary background in prop building for Disney and Lucasfilm. Key builds include R2-D2, Chopper, Wally, R4P17. He's been featured on StarWars.com. He has been tested twice, and I believe featured his mouse droid CH33Z, which went on to appear on the Star Wars show. He's been around the galaxy a fair few times, but always returns home as a third-generation zesty and fruity messiah, an ambassador of smiles, never bitter or sour. He is Michael McMaster. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. You need more sugar, a little more caffeine.
Yeah,
You'll be fine.
I had a triple shot latte, I think, a minute ago, so I'm buzzing right now, which is nice. But how are you doing anyway?
Great. A lot of people are trying to adjust to the quarantine, stay at home. I'm self-employed. I work at home, so absolutely nothing has changed for me.
Absolutely. Well, it's okay for some. There's some people out there that are kind of really suffering, but I, like you, I'm self-employed. I run a business, and this kind of thing, this YouTube stuff that I'm getting involved with at the moment is kind of helping with sanity, mental health, whatever you want to kind of call it, really. And it gives you a kind of appetite for a little bit more. And I'm, my topic right now, as I've just said, is kind of resin printing. And I've got a relatively small resin printer. But I hear you have a big one, and I'm not talking about your chopper.
Where is it hiding back there? There it is, right there.
Fantastic. So the good news is that you're able to print bigger, well, certainly bigger than most, at a fraction of the cost from the Form 3L. Tell me everything about it.
Yeah, it's really a big printer. It's kind of funny, typical of technology. Already, they have announced 2 new printers, which I think are going to be larger and faster, which is just the way the technology goes. But yeah, it's a very large printer. I started out 2 years ago with a Form 2, and that Form 2 cost $4,000 at the time. But I thought it was a worthy investment. We were making lots of high quality parts quickly, so I could justify it. This comes along just 2 short years later, about a year and a half actually, when they made the announcement, and this cost $1,800 and is about 5 times the volume.
Amazing.
Just amazing.
400, right?
Yes, yeah. And right next to it is my Creality, CR10 S5, which is still a useful machine. It's not the easiest machine to use. It's got its issues, as everyone is well aware at this point. But it can still make larger parts. So if I need to make something extremely large, like a droid dome, for instance, it still goes to that machine. Because even in the Phenom, I'll still have to slice it up into segments to print it. But the prints come out beautifully. See if I can do this. Things like this. I mean, they come out of the machine basically finished. It's just remarkable what you can do with it. There's no real, other than a little bit of cleanup, not much sanding or anything. We can literally prime it, paint it, put it in a droid, which is just fantastic. Been a game changer for us. Printing a layer at a time in just several seconds, I basically load up the area, the build volume. I'll just take every part that I have that I can squeeze in there because it doesn't alter the speed, unlike a traditional printer. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, touching on the CR10, I've actually got one kind of working its way down here at the moment, and I've just done some upgrades on the motherboard to it. And it's an SKR 1.4 turbo with these special drivers. And I've never heard of it before. I started doing some Googling. The printer is silent. The performance is staggering. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, hang on a minute, is there some scope here to actually improve what I've got here? So my next couple of videos that are going to be coming out are going to be based around the CR10 and how to really improve that and understand it a bit more. And I'm talking to hot end manufacturers and a whole bunch of other people and trying to get a few more people involved with this, because rather than going out and spending $4,000 on a FDM printer that's going to work every time, actually, could we improve on what we've already got? So I think it's
right.
Topic. The great thing about 3D printers is they improve themselves. So as you're printing something, I'm printing boxes, I'm printing screen cases, I'm doing all this extra stuff, so I can essentially make a hybrid printer here. And as I say, the results so far are amazing. And, you know, I'd certainly encourage anybody else to look into that if you've got the technical ability, because it's not a 5-minute job. Let's jump back onto your printer for a second. Can I assume this isn't a hobbyist machine? And the target market isn't your typical Comic-Con cosplayer who's having an identity crisis?
Yeah, so to back up a little bit, my history, I've been working for Lucasfilm and Disney for many years and building droids for them and other large-scale props. And so, yeah, this machine came about because I was making a lot of things by hand. You know, I can do a little bit of 3D modeling, but, you know, I'm still learning. I have a gentleman named Gordon Tarpley who does most of my 3D modeling for me. And so, yeah, it's just been a wonderful tool. It's just another tool. And so it allows me to quickly make prototypes. Oftentimes when you work for these large companies, they're not quite sure what they want. And so this has been wonderful because I can make a part and within hours have it in my hand. I can show it to them. They'll say, yes, that looks great, or no, that looks terrible. You know, do something different. So, you know, we have that ability. And so it paid for itself literally in the first month. And it's just been a wonderful machine. And getting back to what you're talking about the Creality, you know, what's amazing to me is the user group out there. You know, so many of these modifications came from frustrated users, and they're the ones who have actually improved the performance of the machines. And I'm hoping at some point that will actually trickle backwards to the manufacturers, and they'll start beefing these things up and making a little bit higher quality machine. I realize their target audience, they're trying to get in as cheaply as possible and get their foot in the market. But now it's about speed and quality and reliability. And so, you know, there's so many machines now that you can choose from. You know, they're going to have to step up their games a little bit.
Well, I think they do a little bit, Mike, because what they tend to do is they look at the community and what's coming out there, and then they call it the pro. So they take a little bit of what they've got, they manufacture that into the next model. You know, I've got a number of these things, and all of them are slightly different. There's little tweaks, there's little things that they've tried to improve upon, and then they've also made things cheaper as well. You know, and if you look at the way that business runs, certainly, you know, when you're manufacturing a product, you know, your high-end costs are here, and then finally the line sort of dips, and then you actually start making your money sort of towards the end of the process. So launching a really, really good high-end product is a really tricky part. But I totally agree with you. You know, we've been on these Zoom chats as of late. Everybody's got these CR10s, and everybody's saying the same things. And I'm just wondering if there's a community insider like myself, and I certainly found that Darren's doing some modifications. Is there something we can do here to make this almost a consumer product, so that we're not messing around being 3D printing engineers, and in fact we're actually being model makers, you know, which is what we're, right, which is what the target's supposed to be. So, you know, I'm really, really interested in that. And as I say, I've spoken to a bunch of different people, and I'm really, really excited to try and get this off the ground and, you know, showcase to our 10,000 odd members, you know, actually, if you've got one of these, for a few $100s, you could improve this.
I'll be watching that with great interest.
Yeah,
because,
like,
you know, I'm right there with you.
You know, on the resin printer side, I've got a Nova 3D Ben A4, which is a relatively small build plate. But as you said about the quality is absolutely amazing. And regardless of your build plate, if it's big or small, whatever you're printing, if you can fit it on that, brilliant. You know, yours is a $2,000 27 by 15 by 400 MSLA printer with a huge lead screw and 2 linear rails that sounds like a jet engine. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is very loud. That's the first thing you have to get used to. When I was reading all the reviews, they said, you know, you're not going to have this in your bedroom or in your kitchen. You know, you're going to want to put this out in a garage or workshop and make sure that it's kind of kept by itself because it's very loud. Now, that said, there has been a firmware upgrade. And so now the fans only come on when it's actually physically printing. I have not done the upgrade yet. So when I turn the power on, all the fans are running wide open, and you can hear it outside my shop. Yeah, you definitely want to keep it the shop ventilated. You know, the downside of the resin printers is that you know, before the resin is cured, it's inert. You know, once it's cured. Prior to that, you know, it is basically a hazardous substance, and so you want to make sure to have proper gloves. You know, you don't want to get any of it on your hands, your face, your eyes. It's kind of a dangerous material, so you have to handle it with caution. And of course, as it's getting warm, it does fume, and there definitely is a smell. When you come into the shop, you can smell that it's working.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are some unknowns, I think, at this point about the safety of it. Certainly people don't want to, just keep it in your bedroom printing 24/7. That might not be the healthiest solution.
Yeah, that was my next question, actually, Mike. Any drawbacks, the smell and environmental issues. And, I run a recycling business in the UK here. And, part of my remit was to, understand exactly at what point does this become inert? Putting it in the sun, even the failed prints, or if you ever get a failed prints, or, the supports and things like that, curing everything and then disposing it in the correct ways. I've got a small dog. A lot of people have children. This is quite dangerous. You knock them off the bed. Maybe you stab yourself in the hand. You're wearing gloves, potentially wearing face masks. For all intents and purposes, a bit like a meth lab mentality. When you're setting stuff up, you spray bottles, you've got bats, you're curing stuff. What was the reason that you went for this particular make model over is it the Frozen or Frozing?
Yeah. I went with this mainly because of the positive reviews. The build volume was slightly bigger than the Frozon, and the price. I mean, it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around the fact that I could buy something half the cost of my prior resin printer that was many times the build volume. These things continue to advance. As soon as I bought it, a month later, they announced the larger machine, which I know a lot of users were upset about, but that's just the nature of this technology right now. It's in its infancy, I guess it's golden age, if you will. And these things will continue to get larger, faster, and cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, did you know 6 million 3D printing units have been sold worldwide?
Wow.
Yeah, it's mental. Big business. And, they said this about the television. Do you foresee this technology being in pretty much in everyone's home?
It very well could be. I could see people, producing items, everyday items that they need. Why go to the store when you can actually, print it overnight? Hit the button, download the file, print the button. You get up in the morning and there's your part. That's an amazing technology. And you can print with more than just resin. As you know, they're very high end. Adam Savage built an Iron Man suit using titanium powder and laser sintering. And so the possibilities are endless. I mean, people will be building some amazing things without doubt.
The increased cost of resin and the higher stakes when considering potential failures. And by that, I mean, if you're 6 or 7 days into a CR10 FDM print and all of a sudden you have a blockage, right? We've all been there. We all know what that, you've got a considerable amount of cost, well, a lower amount of cost than probably in resin. And we're talking like $40 a bottle per litre versus maybe $20 of, PLA or PETG or whatever. Where do you see that with potential failures? Have you had any potential failures?
No failures so far, knock on resin with the Phenom. The CR is another story. I have boxes and boxes and boxes of failed prints, all sorts of issues, nozzle issues, parts releasing from the bed, the build platform, things like that. I know there have been, I'm part of one of the Phenom user groups on Facebook, and I've seen some of the failures. It is an LCD screen. They have a limited lifespan. What that lifespan is, it could be anywhere from 100 hours to 400 or 500 hours. There seems to be no consistency at the moment, but I'm sure that over time, this is a modular system. That was another reason I wanted this particular printer, is that I can replace any of the components easily. If the screen dies, you just pull the screen out. Over time, if they become higher resolution, they'll or lower cost. It's replaceable. Everything on it can be easily. Yeah. So yeah, there have been a lot of advantages with it, but yeah, so far no failed prints. But I do know that obviously that can happen with any machine.
This is a $2,000 or $1,800 printer. Is it more of a $3,000 printer in reality? So by the time you've got your resin, you've got your IPA, you've got your post-processing stuff, are we talking, if you people are looking to buy this thing and they're looking to spend $2,000, all of a sudden they're going to go, oh, hang on a minute, I need to find another £1,000 or dollars to now get the rest of the equipment?
Yeah, right off the bat, I bought 2 liters of resin, which it's about $60 a liter, so $120. And then, for cleanup, 99%, IPA, So there's another $30, $40. I mean, so it was about $2,000, between the printer and the materials. Maybe a little more. Let's say 2,100. And then, of course, I guess you can figure in electricity, things like that. But it's like any other appliance. So I will say you have to keep it in a heated. I found that keeping the temperature up in the shop is key. So, if you want to consider that expense, my workshop is separate from my home, and I have to keep it heated in the winter when I'm running these printers. So there is a cost associated with that. About $150 a month, $200 a month, depending on how cold it gets. Electricity is expensive in California.
Man, you need to get some solar panels on that thing.
Yeah, that is in the works when I can afford it.
Fair enough. So how are you finding working in resin then, and that size of printer? I mean, obviously you've had resin printers before, as you've said. How is this, is this blowing your mind? Is it amazing? What's your thoughts on it?
It has been everything that I had hoped for and more. There are a few things, the build plate, I don't like the design of it. That's kind of been a common complaint, that it should be tapered at the top because it's immersed in the resin when you first start. So as you're building and the plate is raising up out of the resin's still pooled on the top of this plate, which is just a poor design. And it's been, we've been complaining about this for quite some time now, and I'm sure that eventually the company will just make a replacement build plate that will have a little better design to it, some sort of a reservoir or a taper to it, which will allow for the resin to run off back into the vat, because it's a considerable amount of resin. You realize how large the plate is. Now you start scraping it off. You don't want to waste a drop because it is expensive.
Yeah, well, I've noticed on the I've looked at a couple of reviews because I wanted to find out a little bit more about this printer, and understand the whole dynamic of what they're trying to achieve, and looking at the type of people that are trying to buy this. And what I found is, I think on the new ones they have tapered that edge. Does it have on the reservoir numbers on it to tell you how much you've actually put in or anything like that?
No, it just has a line. There's a fill line, and if you're going to do a very large print, you need to go back in often, within 12, 13, 14 hours, and continue to fill it. Yeah. I wish there was some solution for that, some way that you could fill a tank and it could somehow keep that level, because you may have to get up at an odd hour and just make sure that you've still got plenty of resin, because I have heard stories of people who ran out of resin in the middle of the night on a very large print.
Sort of auto top-up valve then.
Yeah, it would be neat if there was something like that. It wouldn't be very difficult to make.
Well, they have them on fish tanks, don't they? That if the water level decreases, then it clicks in and goes
exactly.
Forward. So on the consumables and the ongoing costs, you talked about screens, you talked about different types of resin and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything on that printer? I'm always buying nozzles for the CR10, and I can only really sort of reflect this back to FDM printers, because that's kind of what I know. Because with resin printing, and certainly the Ben A4 by Nova 3D that I've got, that pretty simple. There's a screen, there's a vat, and obviously the screen as it burns out over time.
Yeah, that's it. The FEP sheet, that clear sheet that goes in the bottom, that will wear out over time. I've taken great care not to rough it up and scratch it. I know that was some people made the mistake of trying to wipe them down, and you can easily scratch them and mar them up, and then that will affect the print. So you just have to handle everything with care. And but yeah, not too many consumables other than the screen and the sheet, and obviously resin as you go along. The jack screw that is built into it is massive. It is amazing how heavy and well built it is. I mean, the printer is not light. That printer behind me weighs 99 pounds. Wow. The larger version, which I just saw a review for, weighs 150 pounds. These are not small printers. And obviously, you're going to have a table that can support that much weight. There is a smell to it, and it is very loud. So, two things to consider.
Will 3D printers save humanity?
I'm not sure humanity is savable at this point. I would have had a different opinion 2 months ago, but after watching the chaos that's ensued, a little bit disappointed.
Absolutely. Okay, Mike, if we can have a quick tour of what you've got going on there, and I just sort of maybe have a quick look around the printer. Obviously, don't want to infringe on your NDAs or anything there.
Yeah, I'm trying to carefully turn. Let's see if I can turn this around. Tour of the shop. You got this guy looking at you.
Amazing.
And a lot droids. My current project are mouse droids. So there's a lot of mouse droid activity going on. And then whatever that thing was, that's a Lee Towersy dome. I can say that.
Yep.
Beautiful dome. And these are some of the parts that are going in that dome, by the way, that came out of the Phenom. Those are literally right out of the printer about 2 hours ago.
I'm surprised that you didn't go with the aluminium tip for the little radar eye.
Yeah, you know, we're going to be making those out of a different material. That part will be recast in a urethane, and then we'll be using a mold with aluminum powder in it.
Right.
And trying to make something that is a little bit easier to replicate. I won't get into all that.
Right, fair enough, fair enough. So you're using this for casting then, Mike, is that right?
Yeah, so just to go back to this, so here's the part you're talking about. This is what you're talking about here, the hollow projector. So this is just a straight cylinder. So what I wanted to do is put a flange on it. So we 3D modeled a flange. I don't know if you can see it in there, so that it could be mounted in the inside of the dome on the back. And then because this is 3D printing, we just made the mold around it, the housing. So what we can do is fill this with silicone, and then pull the silicone out, flip it over, and make castings of it. So you can even make the mold enclosures as part of the 3D print, which is wonderful. Just amazing. And then we've got some other, this is the new radar eye, and once again, it's set up to be molded. We've made it so that it can be encased in a 2-part silicone mold. And then it has a little lens. So the eye lens will be cast separately and then done in a clear resin that'll be tinted. So we'll have tinted lenses that go inside this. Yeah, just really handy. So yeah, so this is basically the innards. There's really not much to it. You know, you have this vat for the resin. Down below the vat is the LCD screen. And then, like I said, this massive jack screw. I just can't say enough about the engineering on that. It is big and it's heavy. And then this is the build plate. So this is what I was talking about. The new build plates, I guess, are tapered. Problem is this is perfectly flat. So that flat build plate goes down into this vat. And the resin just pools up on top. It pools inside here and gets just a little bit messy. So as it's raising up out of there, I have to use a spatula, and I'm scraping off as much resin as I can get and get it back into the vat. But it is tall. It is a big machine.
What's the biggest thing you've printed on it?
Oh my goodness. So far, mostly small parts. We do have a large print. I'm going to be doing a replica. There was a movie in the 80s called The Wraith, and it was this sinister car, and we're going to be building it at 1/18th scale. And so the body of the car will sit in here vertically, and we'll be able to print that in one shot. But it'll take up almost the entire build volume.
Wow.
So that'll be in a day or two.
Final question for you then, Mike. If you could invent your own printer, what would it be called and what would the specs be?
Oh my goodness. What would it be called? I think I would call it the Prentice 2000.
I'm sure you wouldn't.
No, because of all the innovation. No, I don't know. Every time I think that I would come up with something that would be large enough, I'm sure I would come up with a new part that would, require an enhancement. I would love to have something that could build, let's say, a 3-foot square build volume, and that it could build something in a few hours, and it could build it out of any material. You'd have a selection of material. You could make it out of aluminum or aluminium, as some people say. Make it out of steel or plastic. It would be great to have a variety of materials that you could use in the same machine, and that may just be science fiction. But then, of course, as soon as I say 3 feet, then I think, well, what about a car fender or a hood, or it'd be great to have something that could do, like you have these large CNC routers that are 4 feet wide and 8 feet long. Well, maybe it'd be nice to have a machine that could print, let's say, 4x8. Who knows? I guess it depends on what you need.
As I say, technology seems to be moving at a rapid rate. Michael Badley explained to me in one of my last videos, which is entitled "Are 3D Printers Trying to Kill Me?" It's all about patents, and the more that are released, the more technology seems to be spiraling behind it and emerging from places like China. I'm in awe of what they're able to do. You know, we spoke at an event called R2 UK, where a large kind of conference there. And I said to you, you know, how different is it from back then, you know, when you first started building in 2001 to now? And we talked about accessibility. You've got people like Michael Badley that are, you know, coming up with these 3D printing designs. I know there is an ambiguous approach to some people thinking that they're not strong enough and all that kind of stuff. But what I really like about what you're doing is you've got the traditional methods. So you're still using wood, you're still making things. And I think, you know, it's important not to just rely on 3D printers, but also to have the availability and methods to keep that alive.
Well, you know, you're talking about Michael Badley. So when I built Chopper from Star Wars Rebels for Lucasfilm, that was a 3-month build. It was built from scratch. It was wood and plastic and metal. And, you know, now Michael Badley has a chopper that he is printing 100%. It's 3D printed. And I had my doubts. We talked about the legs and the structure. And he says, you know what? I'll show you something. He printed a leg and he's standing on it. It's bridging, I don't know what he had, it's buckets or whatever he had sitting on. And he stood on the thing and it didn't budge. And I was actually quite surprised. And so, yeah, the technology has advanced, but I still like to use multiple materials. And I have, you know, my comfort zone, I guess, is with, you know, wood and aluminum and things like that. But, and a lot of these parts that we're making, you know, they're just master parts. You know, the resin printers are nice because they create a finished part. We didn't even touch on that. You know, with PLA, when I make a part, there are hours or days of sanding and priming and sanding to get it smooth enough so that we can then cast it, make a mold, make a fiberglass part, whatever. These parts are coming out finished. And I am just with very minimal cleanup, I'm immediately putting a mold over them and making copies. That is a huge time saver. And everything in our business is time. You know, time is money. And so that's been probably the greatest benefit right now of this resin printer, is that it saves me a tremendous amount of time. Not to mention that it's printing the same part in a fraction of the time. When I was printing, let's say, one of these radar eyes, whatever, I could print it on the CR10. Maybe it's going to take 24 hours to print. Well, now in the resin printer, I print it in 4 hours.
Yep.
That's huge, you know. And there's no sanding, no post-process work, you know. So amazing time to be alive.
Absolutely. So what do you think the target audience is on this then, Mike? What's their business? What are they using this for?
It's interesting because most of the people that I deal with are, you know, obviously making props. They're making props for movies, television. We were just in a very high profile studio down in Hollywood that was making props for The Mandalorian. And they used to make everything by hand. It was sculpted and molded and things like that. Well, now they have a whole department of people that are making 3D models, and they're sending them out to literally an army of printers. They have rooms full of printers, every type of printer you can imagine, by the way. No one printer can do it all at this point. So depending on the size and the material and you know, the texture, you know, there's special machines for each. And I was really shocked to find out that these prop studios themselves are relying on these machines more and more. And I know people say, oh, it's going to take away from my job. They've actually added people. They have more people now that are working on, you know, the modelers, the people that are running the machines. And you still have the traditional model makers who then take the parts and, you know, paint them and modify them and add electronics and all that. So it is amazing to see where it's going. But I do know that there are other professions that are using 3D modeling. Gordon Tarpley was telling me about folks that are bicycle enthusiasts that modify parts on their bicycles and make these 3D printed parts. And so it's anyone, I would say, any type of what used to call them garage mechanics. You know, they're tinkerers, the people that are curious, that like to build things for themselves. It's really anyone that's curious about building that would be interested in a 3D printer.
I've been talking to a number of manufacturers, and I'm explaining to them about this sort of captive audience that, you know, we have, you know, where we've been talking to, you know, 100 odd people on Zoom meetings. As I say, there's 10,000 odd members of Star Wars communities trying to build R2-D2s and various other things. And these are, you know, the demographic is generally male, 35 to 50, with a disposable income. if you're willing to drop 15 grand on an aluminium R2, you're probably going to be pretty comfortable with dropping 2 on a resin printer to make your life easier, right? So, and what it all really boils down to right now is that this is a numbers game. You know, you've touched on it as well, with making things quickly and efficiently without the finishing and sanding, or not as much finishing and sanding, being able to turn what you're doing into a better flow. What do you think, you know, in regards to the stuff you're doing now, how much time saving is this machine giving you?
It's saving me collectively in a month. It saves me several days of work easily. There are times where we've probably saved more than a week of physical labor, you know, just by having the machine running, because it can run overnight. You know, we'll design things, and then typically, because I don't want to be sitting here listening to it and smelling it, so I try to wait till the end of the day to, you know, load it up and get it running. So then it can work 8, 10, 12 hours on its own. And then I come in the morning, there's a fresh part waiting for me, which is amazing. I still, after all the time we've used these machines, it still amazes me. It's magic a little bit, you know, when you come in and find a part just waiting, you know, thanks machine. I've got robots making robot parts. So
I get up in the morning, I get the keys, I go to open the door, and I cross my fingers and hope that the CR10 hasn't got a blockage. And the last couple of times, this is why I've literally just ripped one apart and just thought, you know, I'm just going to dump a load of gear into it. I'm going to buy all the stuff I can and try and make this work properly. You go in there with that anticipation, and then it's failed. And then, you know, it kind of sets you up for the day. And this is I think it's quite an important thing to think about is, you know, if you had a failure, the first thing, before you've brushed your teeth, before you've put your socks on, you've got a failure that's there, that sets you up for the rest of your day. I don't want that. Nobody really wants that. And then you've got to scrape it off. You've got to chuck it in the bin. There's no real recycling path for PLA. All right. It's, you know, it takes about 200 years to degenerate, I believe. But you chuck it away, and then you're hitting the button and hoping that it's not going to fail again. And, you know, I'm finding, although resin isn't the be all and end all, and, you know, there's still a big market for FDM, and there's certain things that you won't use resin for. The more I explore this, the more benefits I'm seeing across the board for all sorts of weird and wonderful builders and designers. Michael, thank you so much for being part of this today. Thank you for showing us your machines there and a little tour of your workshop. Brilliant. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy, fruity day to talk to us and let us understand a little bit more about that resin printer.
Well, you're most welcome. Thank you. Grateful that you asked me to be on the program.
No worries.
Long time listener.
Thank you very much to Michael McMaster for coming along and speaking to me today. Please make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell below, and watch out for the Prentice 2000 printer. Anyway, the next video will be coming up in the next couple of days, which is the CR10 S5 upgrades. So I'll see you then.